Hello, this is Eric. Today is the 6th of January 2024, and in this video, we'll be resolving two exercises on the discovery of Brazil. And by the way, this term discovery is pretty controversial nowadays, as many people believe that Portugal was pretty much aware of the existence of Brazil, of the territory of Brazil, upon the so-called discovery of Brazil. But anyway, we're not going to dig, into this issue. We will be doing these exercises here, assuming that this is a time when Brazil was actually discovered by Portugal. Okay. So the first question goes like this: read carefully. Read carefully the excerpt from the letter of Pedro Vaz de Caminha. And when it came to the gospel, that we all stood up with our hands uplifted, they, the indigenous, stood up with us and lifted up their hands, remaining like this until it was finished. And then they settled down like us. And when they lifted up God, we knelt down. Let me go again from the period. And when they lifted up God and we knelt down, they all stood thus, as we were with our hands uplifted, and in such a quiet manner that I assure your highness, they showed to us much devotion. So the question is, regarding the letter by Caminha to the King of Portugal, it can be said that it is, and now let's check the alternatives, and let me also first activate my pen. So the first alternative says, a narrative that projects onto the native populations a Christian worldview, such as if Brazil were a kind of Edenic paradise. Yes, it is correct, right? So let's take this one here. But let's check out the other alternatives, okay? Alternative B says, an impartial account of the indigenous populations because the author narrates exactly what he saw and lived in Brazil. Yeah, he is narrating exactly what he saw and lived, but not in an impartial manner, right? You can see here that he offers his personal perspective, considering the way that the indigenous behaved in this occasion, right? He says that they showed much devotion. So the whole description here clearly shows, Caminha's perspective, view of the things that he described. Alternative C. Let me make this one bold. Okay, a narrative capable of identifying the true essence of the Brazilian indigenous peoples who already knew Christianity. No. The Brazilian indigenous peoples did not know Christianity. So this one is definitely wrong. An account that expresses the chronicler's total ignorance and unpreparedness about the disindigenous and a strategic character of the indigenous populations who only wanted to gain the European travelers' trust in order to make profits and make political alliances to defeat their enemies. No, it was totally wrong. Totally wrong. The indigenous did not have any intention of partnering, with the Portuguese to defeat their enemies, which was not the case as well, right? So, no, this one is definitely wrong. And letter E says a story with no historical value. Oh, what do you mean by that? No historical value. Of course it has a historical value. Although it is filled with the settlers' point of view, of the events that he's describing, it certainly has a historical value, right? It doesn't matter that it is an Eurocentric and even prejudiced description, but it has historical value for sure. Okay, so this is alternative A. The alternative A is the correct one for this question. So let's check out question 2. And it says, the cultural richness of the Brazilian people comes from the various ethnicities that formed us, producing a diversified cultural heritage. Tick the correct option. Option A says, the indigenous groups found on the coast by the Portuguese were mainly tribes of the Tupi trunk that, having settled a few centuries earlier, were actually, right? Let me correct it here. Were still displacing old occupants from other cultural matrices. Yes, it is right. That is the case here. Many people, actually, let me take it. Many people see, the indigenous peoples living here before the arrival of the Portuguese as the Garden of Eden, right? They were all there, relaxing, planting, fishing, and being in peace with all the other indigenous peoples all the time, and that was not the case. They were constantly engaged in wars, and that was the case. The Tupi trunk that formed at the time. Most of the tribes that came across the Portuguese, they were in battle and displacing former occupants, former occupants, in this part of the territory that was reached by the Portuguese initially, right? So that's the correct alternative, but let's take a look at the other alternatives as well. At the time of the arrival of the Cabral squadron, the tribes of the Tupi trunk were the only ones who had a social class organization, and the presence of the state was already a reality. Let me check it again. At the time of the arrival of the Cabral squadron, the tribes of the Tupi trunk were the only ones who had a social class organization. No way. In the continent, we had many other reports of tribes, of peoples who had social class organization and who had the presence of the state. Incas, Mayas, right? They were all, and I'm mentioning here just two of them. Even in Brazil, there were others, other tribes, other peoples who had social class organization. So that one is definitely wrong. The social institution, this is letter C. The social institution that hindered the formation of the Brazilian people was brother-in-law based marriages or marriage. Let me correct it here. So let me read it again. The social institution that hindered the formation of the Brazilian people was brother-in-law based marriage. An old usage sorry guys, I was really in a hurry when I translated this document, so I'm correcting here, some parts of the alternatives, but, take it easy with me. So the social institution that hindered the formation of the Brazilian people was brother-in-law based marriage, cunhadismo, an old usage that banned the incorporation of foreigners into his community, into its community, right? Brother-in-law based marriage, guys, was basically a tradition, a practice at the time that involved, the leaders of the tribes offering one of the ladies or some of the ladies in their families, to the foreigners who visit them, or who approach them in order to establish alliances, right? So it's totally the opposite of what the alternative is saying here. It says that an old usage that banned the incorporation of foreigners. No, it was totally the opposite. This practice aimed at incorporating foreigners into, these people's communities, so that they could have peace, so that they could be stronger, to defeat other enemies and so on. Right? So this is wrong. Letter C. It says, the emergence of a Brazilian ethnicity did not annul the ethnic identifications of the indigenous, thus consolidating the racial democracy that we live, or in which, right? in which we live nowadays. Sorry, not social democracy, right? It says racial democracy. Guys, this is a pretty controversial alternative, right? There are people in Brazil that believe we're living right now a racial democracy. But it is not entirely true, right? Yes, we compare it to previous decades or times in the history of Brazil. We see the racial issue much better than in old times. But we still cannot say that we have racial democracy in Brazil. One should just look at, companies, for example. You will rarely see a black chairman or manager, in big companies or in companies in general, right? So racial democracy is not an uncontroversial reality in Brazil. So that alternative is also wrong, right? And finally, alternative E. From the first days of colonization, the Jesuit project was the only alternative to safeguard indigenous and African cultures, respecting their beliefs and representations. No. On the contrary, right? The Jesuit project basically aimed to destroy the indigenous and not African, right? Because actually the Jesuits were not really concerned about preserving and, protecting the black Africans, right? Sorry, the black Africans, the black slaves from Africa. They were more concerned about the indigenous in Brazil for many reasons that I'm not going to explain here in detail right now. You can watch our classes on this topic, right? But when the Jesuits supposedly intended, or tried to safeguard or to protect the indigenous, they were more concerned about evangelizing them and converting them into Christianity and automatically destroying, their pagan beliefs and representations, right? So that alternative is also wrong. So the alternative that is correct here is alternative A. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please don't forget to like the video. And I hope to see you in future videos on the history of Brazil, right? Bye-bye.